That's it. Yeah, okay. Well, here we go. Thank you. Welcome to East Gippsland Shire Council Ordinary Meeting, meeting 17th of March 2020 at the Cann River Hall and Recreation Reserve, Cann River. And the gentleman there, you can sit down, take a seat over there, thank you. East Gippsland Shire Council live stream records and publishes its meetings via webcast to enhance the accessibility of its meetings to the broader East Gippsland community. These recordings are also archived and available for viewing by the public or used for publicity or information purposes. At the appropriate times during the meeting, any members of the gallery who are addressing the council will have their image, comments or submissions recorded. No other person has the right to record council meetings unless approval has been granted by the chair. Please ensure that mobile phones and other electronic devices are turned off and in silent mode for the duration of the meeting. Councillors, I'd like to remind you to make sure that your microphone is turned on when addressing the gallery. Members of the public wishing to speak, we will ensure that the microphone is turned on for you. Thank you. Now we'll get on with the meeting itself. Now, procedural. Opening and recognition of traditional custodians.
Mr Acting Mayor, if I may, I would like to acknowledge the Snowy Monaros people, the traditional owners on the land on which we are meeting here today, and on behalf of Council I pass my acknowledgement and respects to their elders past and present.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Now, apologies. We have Natalie O'Connell and I believe Councillor White. Is that correct? Did we have any other apologies? No, well, that'll be accounts for all that, doesn't it?
So there's no other apologies, Mr. Acting Chair.
No other apologies. There's no need for them at this point in time. A declaration of conflict of interest, Mr. CEO.
None have been declared, Mr. Acting Chair.
Yeah, okay. Now the confirmation of minutes, that the minutes of the Ordinary Council meeting Tuesday 3rd of March 2020 be confirmed. We need a mover. And thank you. Thank you, Councillor Peltz. Now, do we have a seconder? Councillor Roberts, thank you very much. All those in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. Next meeting. The next Ordinary Council meeting, the 7th of April 2020, to be held at the Corporate Centre, 273 Main Street, Bairnsdale, commencing at 6 p.m. And that's noticed here, we don't need a motion on that. A request for leave of absence. Is there any request for leave of absence? None, ladies? None. Okay, thank you. Request to speak about community projects, and this one seems to be covered, is it, Mr. CEO?
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, we do have a group that we have a lady who's wishing to speak to Council today. Her name is Jeanette Young. She's a Red Cross member and also a member of the local community. So we'll ask Jeanette to come forward.
Thank you, Jeanette. Would you like to come forward, please? We'll make sure you've got a spot there.
And then microphone so that others can hear.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jeanette. You can go ahead now. Have you got your mic on and all that?
Yeah, ready to go.
Thank you. I can hear you loud and clear.
No, I'm not going to tell you fellas to get up off your butts and do a bit like I threatened this morning. But thank you for asking me to speak today and to give me the privilege. What I'm going to speak about is my experience through from the 29th of the 12th, and that's probably the only date I'm going to give you, because dates, times and days are just all mixed up, and it doesn't matter who I speak to, they're on the same boat. Yes, we were taking notes, but it was quite hectic. On the 29th, we become aware that there was fires at Goongarra, Buchan and Swiss Creek. So that's when we started to think we're in Cann River and what goes from there. The Far East Gippsland were left out of the warning, creating confusion amongst travellers and community, and that, I say, is very high on the list. Communications, there was no one to go to ask what he's doing. We sat here at the school where we were using the school as a place of last resort, because we knew the fire was coming. We had a lot of plans to be put into action. Now, part of this paper that I've got in front of me is from our local policeman, Andrew Cochrane, who has put in an apology. Police ensuring other local SES to prepare for issues associated with mass evacuation. We were at the school where I was partly Red Cross and partly Shire, somebody said, and partly community. I did register people as they come in the door, but that was mainly for us to Andrew and I met lots of times. Delpy come down and met with me, and we were trying to pinpoint where people were, who we had that had come down to the school and registered. There was a massive amount of confusion because we didn't feel that we had the right answers to give to the questions that was coming out. I know there was meetings up at Delpy each day, but the times, they didn't seem to be regular. No one said to me, can you come? If I left, we had no Red Cross there at all. And lucky for me, I was receiving my instructions, my advice from the state commander in Melbourne, which I have got a pretty good friendship with. At times he tells me it feels like a relationship. We've never met face to face, but Andrew was my backup. They started catering down there. I had a little group in the cookery room that was feeding the community, and Relics Cafe were outside. Lucky Relics Cafe up the street had supplies because they'd just come through Christmas, hadn't got to New Year. They had well and truly stocked up, and that's what the food that we were using. They were outside with the SES food van. CFA was there. At no time that we were at the school did I feel frightened. My biggest moment of being frightened was the morning that we got the phone call at 4 o'clock, and the words that were said to me when I answered was, "School now." For some reason, our ute is usually parked in the driveway and Bill backs it out. For some reason, and he doesn't know and neither do I, the ute was facing out the driveway. And I live just down here, and when I came we were driving out of the gateway, and I looked up and all I could see was this red glow. I knew the fire was close, so I put in one phone call to my daughter in Queen Leanne and said, "Please don't be frightened. Dad and I are going to the school. We will be safe, but let the others know, and I will ring you when I can." That was the minute that I was frightened. Once I got to the school and people were coming in, there was a lot of...
You okay?
Yep, I'm okay.
Yeah, good.
There was a lot of confusion. Nobody knew where they were going, what they were doing. So that's when I became Red Cross community and took control of registering people. If I wasn't at the table, I left a paper for people to put their name, phone number and their address, and I also added, are you staying at the school or are you leaving? And that's how we sat. There was people at the school that stayed, that I honestly believe at that stage need not have been in Cann River, because we still had roads open, we still had time to plan, but they came in and some of them were being quite disrespectful, but every time I said something, it's because everybody's nervous. The relief centre on a day after between the 29th and the 30th was opened up. I got the message to open it up. I didn't have it opened up fully when I got a message to close it down. At that stage we had extra police in town where we only have one. We had, Andrew told me yesterday he thought it was between 8 and 12 police walking around in Cann. They also, we've got a very small unit, SES unit here. There was extra SES unit come in, extra CFA. We didn't have a strike team, but we had extras. Everywhere you looked, there was people in yellow uniforms. Some of those people should never have had yellow uniforms on. They weren't trained, because at my experience, and this is just purely my experience, the moment that they put them on, they thought they had authority. And that was the police in the police department. I questioned why one member was in police uniform and coming into the school and forgetting that that was our school, this community school. We were there as in a lymph plan that we've got, and we wanted to protect the school inside and outside. There was things that were done that I expressed my opinion, but we had no one. Communications and information was zilch. And I respect the fact that the roads were closed after a certain time. We had no phone service, and there we stood. At one stage, this town had no phone service, mobile or landline. We had no police for protection. We had no way in or out, so therefore we had no mail, no papers, there was no way they could get people in to help the ones that were here that stood alone. And I think this day and age there should have been a path early in the piece that those people were brought in. They managed to get extra CFA in, they managed to get SCS in, and they managed to get police in. But there was no one come in to help and support the ones that were here. At that stage, the new start in vicinities of West Wingan Road and Wingan, and that's that side. So we had up there, around there, and down there. The water's that way. And at one stage down Tamboon, they were told to get out and they decided to leave. I've got no idea when the first one went. The first convoy that went out was 2 buses and 43 cars. But there still seem to be a lot of people left in Cann River, a lot of people that perhaps should have been out on those convoys. And because I had the registration list, they were asked, there was a meeting before the convoy left, they were asked if you were staying to form a group over there, if you were going in the convoy over there, and we were to register both sides. That didn't happen. That didn't happen. Because there was no one that would say, hang on, this is what you're supposed to be doing. So there was people went on the buses, people went out by private car, and we sat down for half an hour after, and we were putting names on papers of faces that we seen getting on the buses and going out by private car. I'm not sure how long after, as I said, the days run into one another. The second convoy went out, and there was people coming back in. Roads were closed. They were saying there was no way in and out. And yet you could go to the road sign where it said closed, talk to the police, and they couldn't give you any information. There was several muck-ups when the roads did start to open. We had moved from the school to here, where we had supplies, non-perishable supplies, until we got sorted out after a couple of days, and we got fresh fruit and veggies, some meat, some bread, and eggs in, and that really lifted the town of Cann River. People were saying, when are you going to start getting back to normal? When are you going to start cutting these supplies off? And my response was, do you know what normal is for Cann River? You get up tomorrow morning like I'm going to do, and we're going to Bairnstow. I've got a medical appointment, and we'll also shop. You can't go into your supermarket here and buy fresh fruit and veggies, and you can't buy meat. So a normal day, you go to Eden shopping, you go to Bombala shopping, and you go to Bairnstow shopping. That's a normal day. So the idea of having the fresh fruit and vegetables come in was a lifter for this town. We had oodles and oodles of supplies, boxes and boxes. Half the time we didn't know where they come from. Half the time they arrived and we didn't know they were coming. And a lot of times we specifically asked for things and we didn't get it.
Excuse me a moment, Janet. If you wouldn't mind, we've only got a couple more minutes to go on this. We'll give you a bit more than that, obviously,
Yep.
but could you make a couple of strong points that you need to express that we ought to know about? And then you seem to have enough there to write a book, so perhaps
I can give
there might be an opening for you.
I can give you incidents, things that came up. The request for generator to power the relief centre in event of losing power, and that was here. We had the hall very quickly with a plug that a generator could be put in. I don't know how many times Andrew come to me and said, yes, it's coming. And then, no, it's not coming. The request was made via the ICC but never supplied. Further request for generator for service station to supply fuel in the same event was also never supplied. Due to the Far East Gippsland being left out, no warning signs, the influx of travellers and evacuees settling in the Cann River caravan park, and then they rolled onto the school. We handled it. Request was made to issue warning advice for the ERC area, read the LIMP activation, never occurred. Community members arriving at a safer place due to lack of fire plan and ability to leave, that was very low. Club Terrace impacted by Goongarra fire and continuing to ERC, we looked at that. That was, Club Terrace got hit hard. Landline phones down, mobile phone reception was nil. And this wasn't just for an hour, this was for a day. We lost power, lost phone service here yesterday, and I think half the town's still working through missed phone calls. The impact that was happening was inaccurate. Regular community meetings conducted providing information for community was very, very low. When we were here, there was to be a big public meeting. The people that were being choppered in never arrived, and one poor fellow, he was a policeman, stood up and he tried to give the information to the community, and he wasn't real confident in what he'd worked. Between 50 and 100 community members were still at the school. The structure of the school is better than they say at the hall, but I've got a list and I'm prepared to show it to anyone that wants to read it.
Yeah, could you leave us a copy of that, thank you?
Yes. If you wanted a few more copies, I could get my husband to go home and photocopy it.
And run them off, yeah, it seems
Yes.
like a little bit of a filibuster. We don't have that here, but,
How many copies?
oh, half a dozen, say that. Yeah, and then we can expand
Mr.
on
Mayor,
that,
yeah,
we
Mr.
can
Acting
multiply
Mayor, we can
on
do
that.
If we just get one copy, we can
Yep.
share that with the councillors.
And we can copy more as needs be, as if needs must.
And thank you
Oh,
you for
not
the
at all, no,
opportunity. I think it's now time that we all sort of started talking to one another and getting on the same wagon, and if we have another emergency on this level that it was, and I don't think there'll be many sitting in here today that will be there, but we have got younger ones coming up, and if we can put the wrongs right, that'd be very good.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Janet, thank you.
Mr Mayor, if I may have a question before Jeanette leaves.
you want a quick
Yeah,
question?
just whilst you're at the table, I was just curious how long you were without power for here in Cann River and the surrounding area, and perhaps how long the phones didn't work at that emergency time come the 30th of December 2019 through to the 4th of January when the second strike hit. Can you please tell us how long you were actually isolated in this region for, please?
I can't give you the exact time. Anyone sitting behind me give it was at least 2 days. Yes,
So 9 days without power
yes.
and isolated for 7 weeks up here, is that
Yes,
correct?
Yes,
I believe because the Prince's Highway was cut off and inaccessible for most of that time from Orbost to the border.
yes.
Is that correct?
And Bombala Road had a road closed sign on it.
The Monaro Cann Valley Highway
Yes, so
was
you
closed,
You couldn't get that way at all.
had no access.
Although some people were going through, and Andrew said yesterday, they were in a bit of a turmoil because it was their signs were out, road closed, but he knew people were getting through.
Thank you very much, and I really thank you for your deliverance today, because it's a really important story that needs to be heard. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you, councillors. Now we have public question time. Have we got anything there, Mr CEO? I think we've got.
No, there are no questions, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
No. Okay, thank you. And now petitions, and there's nil there as well. It would appear, I see none. Yeah, thank you. Notice of motion and recession, Mr CEO.
There are no notice of motion or rescission, Mr Deputy Mayor.
And deferred business?
Nil as well.
And councillor and delegates' reports? We've got one? Councillor Peltz, thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr Mayor, and I only raised this due to the fact that last Friday I
Oh,
sat
that's
in
right, yeah.
at the Rural Council's meeting, and I felt that there was a few points that needed to be raised here at the table today for us to consider over the next few weeks. And I would like to advise of some interesting points raised at the Rural Council's meeting last Friday, which I feel needed to be considered. Number one, in the light of the deliberating bushfires we experienced in our region and our counterparts over the hills at Tawong, who endured similar circumstances to us over the summer period. Tawong, being a much smaller council than ours, was ill-equipped to deal with the emergency situation which evolved from the impact of the bushfire, and 40% of their council staff were directly affected and lost their homes, which actually meant to them, for a staff membership of about less than 100, 120 people, they actually had a lot of staff that were unable to fulfil their roles, and their load capacity of the Shire had been severely impacted. The state legislative states that the local government should be able to deal with natural disasters, but I'd say that with neither ours nor Tawong's were adequately equipped to deal with what we were dealt with on the 30th December, which followed through to the 4th of January 2020. So works which Tawong will be reporting on and which will be finalised in July, were a report on how well the state government of Victoria responded to the 2020 bushfire impact. B, how well has the state implemented the recovery of these bushfires, and C, what is the state level of preparedness for bushfires and emergency response management for councils. From the perspective of a small government authority, to manage something so huge as what we were delivered is much, it must be seriously considered that and stated that one size does not fit all, because that was absolutely catastrophic what we actually were dealt. And them being a small council, they actually felt it was above and beyond their capabilities to deal with something to that size. And I don't disagree, because it was a huge struggle for us, and we're still dealing with it now. Number two, it was highlighted during the meeting that there are many additional costs coming our way in council that have not been raised and identified. We need to consider in our budget processing coming up. A, that there is an expected increase of election costs to council with the increase of the VEC fees, and rural council, with the increase of VEC fees being approximately around 40% more than what they were 4 years ago. Basically, it's a cost that rural councils are expected to wear, and the rate capping at 2% is actually quite a disadvantage to councils not being able to leverage any additional fee. And that we'll need to find the difference of the legacy defined benefit scheme funds, and that will probably be called upon this financial year too, with regards to the economic national and international economy that we're actually facing at the moment. So there's a real issue with regards to revenue problems raising for rural and country councils, and it is something that we'll be dealing with at the table. I just wanted those points highlighted, because it'll be something that Liz and the group need to be aware of, but also us at the table. So if that could just be noted, that's all I had to say. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now, Councillor Roberts, you're next.
Thank you, Mr Deputy. Nothing from me this month. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ellis.
I have a written report to submit to council on the last several weeks, Mr Mayor, and will do so. I'd just like to quickly congratulate Andrea Ford and her husband again for Opera by the Lakes, held at Nyringalang on the weekend. Another 1,000 people attended the event, and once again an outstanding success. Thank you.
Yes, thank you much for that Councillor Ellis. You achieved the 3-minute limit, with except Councillor, where are we? Reeve. Thank you, Reeves.
So I've got a bit of credit up my sleeve, have I, because we're running ahead. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to have a few of our local friends and members of the community here. It's a great thing to be here in Cann River, and thank you for hosting us. I'm going to continue the theme around bushfires and recovery, and some of my observations from the travels that we've been involved in. And councillors, last week, only 2 weeks ago, I quoted Grace Brennan, the 2020 Australia Day address speaker, who said, "Country towns have been built on what I call a foundation of doers." Well, I think we've heard from a doer this afternoon as well. I want to dwell on these matters of recovery and resilience, especially here at Cann River. Now, we've been to many communities who are recovering and moving on at varying speeds. And it's my observation that there are a number of resilience factors that make a community and individuals in that community better able and more likely to positively recover and more quickly. And those resilience factors are those which we, if you like, pay forward, that create social capital in our community, that in part immunises and armour plates those individuals and the communities. And participation, or being doers, is the answer, as Grace Brennan says. And participation in volunteer organisations, Red Cross, SES, CFA, Ambulance Victoria, op shops, the local church committees, having high participation in social community organisation participation rates like Landcare, the school council, visitor information centres, the community house, even the singing group, the book club, participation in developing the local community plan, the LIMP, Clean Up Australia Day, the RSL, the Pony Club, coaching the footy or hockey team. It's all too often that these roles are played out by relatively few. But that's the stuff that glues our community together and helps us develop those resilience factors and recover better. When we're connected and joined up and have social and emotional connections in our community, those communities are more likely to quickly recover. These communities form community recovery committees more quickly and effectively. We've seen that in Mallacoota. They see a path and join up in recovery better. What do they call themselves? The thinking group. Yeah. Being doers is a key future learning and outcome from these events. The more we can join up our communities before disasters occur, and I know Sue Ann is sitting over there somewhere and she's a key contributor to joining up our communities through our shire, the better those communities will plan, prepare and recover and better able to be better placed in the future. So a key recommendation, councillors, from my observations is to create volunteer and participation opportunities for all members of our communities in their normal lives well before the disaster erupts. And this, of course, includes from young people to older people. The more people are active participants in planning and the response, relief and recovery process, the better the community will be. The quicker it will recover and the more durable they'll be and lasting in their recovery. Thanks, councillors.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Reeves. Councillor Rottino.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I only have a couple of things to report and I'll put that in next month's report rather than take up any time. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll try and get through by 3 o'clock for you, Councillor Rottino. Councillor Toohey, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I have not done a report, but I would like to make a comment and to congratulate the organisers of the Orbost show. I attended that last weekend and it was a magnificent spectacle that they put on, well received by all, very well attended. Not that I've been before, but it was just fantastic to see such a big group of people, which sadly can't happen now. At least not for a little while, but I would like to give them my congratulations. It was excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Toohey. I believe you had a fair bit to do with that, Councillor Peltz, the organising of that.
I attended the day and helped out where I could on the day, but you know, the committee has it down pat, and it was great to see. I think the numbers were up to about 1,800 people, and it was put down to having so much patronage because the council had given them a $7,000 gate waiver fee, which actually allowed the families and people to come together, which so desperately needed to after the bushfires. So thank you for that, Colin.
Yeah, well, thank you. Okay, well, now we can go on to, where are we? Item number 5, 5.1, 5.1 1, a planning permit application, 187/2019P, a use and development of a dwelling and creation of access to a road zone, Category 1, at 515 Lindenow Glenaldale Road, Lindenow South. Now I'll call upon Jody Pitkin to bring us up to speed on that. Oh, Alan, sorry about that correction, Mr. Hollow.
Thank you,
Thank you very much.
Thank you, councillors. The application to be assessed under this particular council item is the use and development of a dwelling and creation of access to a road zone at 515 Lindenow Glenaldale Road, Lindenow South. Councillors, this site is zoned in the farming zone. It's approximately a 19 hectare property. It is currently developed with some agricultural outbuildings. It seeks therefore the application seeks use and development of a dwelling. The current property is in somewhat a bit of a degraded state. The application was supported by a farm management plan which aims to improve the sites to allow for sheep grazing concern. Councillors, there was 26 objections that were received in relation to this application. You may recall we had a planning consultative meeting. Unfortunately, the attendance wasn't great, but we had an opportunity to hear from the applicant at that meeting. Councillors, you will notice that this report has been prepared by a planning consultant, Nick Anderson from NBA Group. He is an independent town planner. He prepared this report on our behalf to ensure that there was transparency and independence in respect to this matter being heard and considered by councillors, as the property is owned by serving council law. Lastly, councillors, I have noted an error that got through in the report, and that is in the recommendation which suggests that a permit should issue, a planning permit for the use and development of a dwelling. Because there are objectors involved, the recommendation should be amended to say that therefore council resolves to issue a notice of decision to grant a permit for the use and development of dwelling, etc., if councillors were of a mind to approve the application. Thank you.
Okay, we've got any questions, and let's do it. Oh, okay, well, we...
you can move?
You move by...
Mr Deputy Mayor, I'm happy to move along with Mr Hollow's recommendations. I'll read it out for clarity if that helps. That council, being the responsible authority and having considered all the relevant planning matters, determines that application 187/2019P is consistent with the requirements and objective of the East Gippsland Planning Scheme, and therefore resolves to issue a notice of decision to grant a permit for the use and development of a dwelling at 515 Lindenow Glenaldale Road, Lindenow South, subject to the conditions as outlined in the appendix.
Thank you. Okay, now we've got a seconder. Councillor Peltz, what do you want to do it? Which one? Quick. Peltz, thank you. Okay, seconded by Councillor Peltz. Thank you. Okay, all those in favour? Oh, you don't wish to speak to it? And you, Councillor Peltz?
No, I'm happy.
Well, this looks like an easy one, doesn't it? All those in favour? Yeah, me too. Unanimous, thank you. All right, now we move to the next one. That was a nice one. I can just see that far, Councillor Hollow. Well, not Councillor, correction. Thank you. We'll get through this. 5.1.2. Thank you. And this one is a proposal to end Section 173 Agreement P644303X as it relates to 4143 and 79 Bunga Creek Road Lakes entrance. And thanks again, Aaron, for this one.
Thank you, councillors. This is a proposal to enter section 173 agreement as relates to 41, 43 and 79 Bunga Creek Road Lakes entrance. The agreement came about under the previous Shire of Tambo planning scheme that resulted from a subdivision which created a sub-minima lot, and therefore the agreement had to be put into place. The agreement determined that should the land be rezoned to rural B, that the agreement would end. Well, with the Victorian planning provisions came into eventuation, and all shires had to have their planning schemes respect and relate to the Victorian planning provisions. It was determined to rezone this land Rural Living Zone Schedule 4. A subsequent application for a planning permit came through to council for a 3-lot subdivision, which we duly issued, but included a condition for the requirement to end the legal agreement through this process. Councillors will recall in previous proposals, the recommendation is to agree in principle to the ending of the section 173 agreement, and then allows the other requirements under the legislation to take place, including community consultation and advertising, and then council is able to make a determination on the substantial proposal at the end of that process. Happy to take questions, councillor.
Thank you. Were there any questions on this matter?
I'm happy to flag that I'd be keen to move this motion, Mr Deputy Mayor.
As a recommendation, yes. Okay, and okay, well, I'll call for a seconder now then. Councillor Roberts. Any further discussion on the matter? No, I see none. All those in favour? Here we go. Another unanimous. Thank you. And now next one is 5.1.3, East Gippsland Planning Scheme Amendment C151, Equip, EQ, I think I'll take that means equipment, Corrections Amendment. And this has been Marchbank. Well, we've got you again, Aaron. Thank you. Nicole. And Nicole.
Yes, thank you, councillors. So joining me today at the council meeting table is Nicole Reynolds. Nicole Reynolds and Ben Marchbank and Elaine Wood have done a power of work in getting this planning scheme amendment proposal up to council. It involves basically a health check to the East Gippsland planning scheme. What it does is it undertakes a set of corrections and amendments that will reduce red tape for many property owners. There is 2 estates, being the Tambo Bluff estate and the Newlands Arm residential estate, where there is a restructure overlay over those properties. When the restructure has been achieved for properties, it is common sense and the correct process to remove that overlay control, as it reduces the red tape involved with any additional planning or building developments on those properties. We are clearing up and cleaning up some of our reserves in terms of their zonings on the property, so that those properties can be developed appropriately. We're also making sure that a private property in Omeo is rezoned from a public zone to a private zone that therefore recognises its freehold land status, and we're removing a heritage overlay in Bairnsdale from a property where the heritage house was burnt down. I and Ms Reynolds are able to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Councillor Pelt.
Yes, if I may, Mr Deputy Mayor. Mr Hollows and Ms Reynolds, with regards to this, other properties that are in the Tambo estate and in the Newlands Arm estates, will they be advantaged by the removal of this, or the, the upgrading of this 173 agreement being removed, or is it by property basis?
So, councillor, as the properties are consolidated as required by the restructure overlay, the removal of the restructure overlay benefits those properties. The reason why is the restructure overlay requires every buildings and works that's undertaken on those properties to get a planning permit. And obviously, that's not the purpose of the restructure overlay. Once it's done its job, it should be removed from those properties. So it will advantage those communities and property owners.
If I may just have a follow-up question. I'm only thinking forward to one of our later items today in regards to the hot springs property that is being proposed for Meetung, and wondering if this 173 agreement will need to be removed from that at some stage.
So, councillors, that's a bit of a separate matter, but I can understand the interrelated connection. These amendments seek to allow the removal of the restructure overlay on Tambo Bay, where Bluff, where the Section 173 agreement and the proposed hot springs are located in Kings Cove. So they're just very close by.
Thank you. Have we got any more on that? Councillor Roberts.
Really brief one about the Riverine Street update. I wasn't aware that I'm quite familiar with that street, and I wasn't aware that there was a road. Bath Street. Is that an allotment or?
Councillors, throughout the Shire of East Gippsland, there's lots of unused road reserves. In the event that council wishes to place a road on those road reserves, there's a process that needs to take place. But back in the day when the land surveyors were dividing up Victoria, they put in a lot of road reserves to allow for that forward planning to take place in the future.
Is that the lot now? Thank you. We have a recommendation here. If somebody would move that for me, please. Councillor Toohey, move councillor. Yeah, seconded Councillor Reid. Any further discussions? All those in favour? Unanimous again, thank you. Now, we've got this next one here. We're going through this pretty well. Good governance. Report on Audit and Risk Committee meeting held on the 25th of February 2020. Chris Fowler is, Peter, you're taking this one. Conazaro. I think I got that right, didn't I?
You're close, Mr Deputy Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. As you state, the Audit and Risk Committee met on the 24th of February 2020. A couple of highlights, I think, that I'd like to just comment on. There was an election for the chair of the Audit and Risk Committee, and Mr Jason Hallier was nominated and accepted the chair position. So Jason Hallier will be the chair for the forthcoming period. We also reappointed two committee members, Councillor Reeves to my right, and also Mr Michael McStephen, who was the former chair of the Audit and Risk Committee, and Mr McStephen will hold that position till the end of June this year in a temporary role. Other items of note were that the Audit and Risk Committee were presented with the Victorian Auditor General's Office Performance Audit Work Program. Quite a detailed document. Certainly the focus in the coming years of VAGO, as they're called, in 1920 financial year, the performance audit focus for VAGO will be on libraries to determine whether local governments are getting value out of the service provision through libraries. In 2021, VAGO will be focusing on waste management and also the maintenance of local roads, again with a view to are we achieving value for money. And in 21-22 financial year, VAGO will be focusing on council parks and open space management. So some quite key services that council provides. So it'll be good to get some feedback from our auditors on those aspects. In addition to that, the Audit and Risk Committee went through its normal agenda items, including outstanding internal audit action items. and also the finance report as up to the 31st of December 2019, which has already been before Council. Also the debtors exception report as at 31st of December 2019, risk management report for December 2019, and also the General Manager bushfire recovery provided an update on the bushfire recovery aspects to date. Happy to take questions.
Have we any? Thank you, Councillor Ellis.
Thanks, Mr Cannizaro. Were there any matters brought before the Audit Committee meeting on the 24th of February that was of concern and that should be reported to Council? That's not recorded in the written report publicly distributed.
If I may, through you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Yes, I highlighted a matter that to the Audit and Risk Committee that was not an issue at this stage, but could potentially be an issue for Council going forward. In confidence, yes.
Councillor Peltz.
Finished? If I might just have a point of clarification, because under regular updates, it's got the committee receiving an update, a note and update for the period ending 30th of June 2019. Is that correct, or was it for the 30th of December 2020 or 2019?
If I may, Councillor Peltz, what page are you on, sorry?
I'm looking at page 26 of our agenda. I'm just clarifying the date, or I would have thought that the 30th of June last year was probably a bit aged.
If it's saying 30 June, it should be 31st of December.
That's what I thought, because I thought that's what you mentioned.
Yes.
So can we just have a change of date with regards to that? Would that be okay? We don't need an amendment, do we? Just the change of the date? I thought that's what you spoke to.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, the report, yeah. 29 of the electronic, yes. Yep. Certainly.
So it should say the 31st of December 2019.
Correct.
Thank you. Thanks for that clarification.
Okay, we've got that. Any further questions, please? Councillors.
Happy to move it.
You're happy to move the recommendation, Councillor Reeves. We have a seconder, do we?
Happy to second that with the date change incorporated. Thank you.
That's noted, Peter.
Thank you.
Cannizaro. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
And all those in favour? Against? Well, there's no need for that, is there? It's another unanimous one. Thank you. Let's go here. Council Assistance Fund allocation, Liz Collins, and thank you very much. I can see that far as well.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. In January, the Premier of Victoria announced a Council Assistance Fund, and Victorian councils who were impacted by the recent bushfires all submitted an application for a share of that fund. Council submitted an application and we received advice that we were successful in being allocated $3.62 million. The fund specifically is to be applied to people who have damaged or destroyed property and business, and or to assist tourism, economic development and property owners and businesses indirectly affected by the recent fires. Attached to the report as Appendix 1 is the allocation of those funds that has been submitted to support the $3.62 million back to the government. The proposed allocation of the fund would see 1.08 million allocated over 3 years for rate waivers for impacted properties where the main dwelling has been destroyed or significantly damaged, and a further 475,000 to support the loss of council's rate base over the next 3 year period. Also, there was $63,000 allocated to address illegal dumping for materials, and around rebate proportionally allocated to commercial and industrial properties classed in Council's rating system as commercial industrial, with some exemptions listed in the recommendation. $1 million both for the 1920 year and the 2021 year. There is a number of recommendations for Council's consideration today that provide the basis of the allocation of those funds in accordance with the allocation attached for the 3.62 million.
Thank you.
Mr Mayor, if I may, I would like to remove myself from the voting right on this, as I feel I probably have a conflict of interest when I look at the appendix and as to what it actually states. Property owner and business that may be advantaged by this decision, so I'd like to remove myself from the room, please. Thank you.
Yeah, could I just have a quick question?
Sure.
You said you're disadvantaged or advantaged?
I may be seen as being advantaged because we have an industrial property.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, it's your decision, so thank you, Councillor Peltz. Yes, well, could I have some clarification on that, Mr CEO?
Can you just clarify what are you actually seeking clarification on? Whether the rest of the remainder of the councillors, if they have commercial properties, would have a conflict of interest?
Yeah, well, it was mentioned by Councillor Rotino or somebody.
Mr. Cannizzaro, do you have a view on this?
My view is that it's up to the councillors, obviously, to declare a conflict of interest. But in the event that each councillor has a potential business, then they may want to choose to exclude themselves. Then the matter can't be voted on if we get below a quorum.
Ms. Collins would like to say something.
Thank you, Ms. Collins.
In terms of when there's a matter where individual councillors are seen to be one of many, then like when we set the rates every year, we set the rates and we set a whole range of things, and councillors may be a rate payer, of course, and they are one of many, could be a private street scheme, one of many, then it's determined that, and it's obviously up to councillors to make a final determination, but would normally be determined that councillors would not have a conflict of interest if you were one of many in that group, and therefore hence why, for example, when we do the budget and the setting of the rates, why there's not deemed to be a conflict of interest with the councillors, but councillors at different times for different matters may choose to. Obviously it's up to them to whether they believe they do have or not, but that's just my understanding.
Thank you, Liz. Now, this leaves us with any further questions? No? Well, we'll go ahead with it. And
Happy to move it, Mr Deputy Mayor.
yeah, Councillor Roberts, so moved. And could I have a seconder, please? Wait on, Roberts. Yeah, now I need a seconder. Councillor Ellis, thank you. All in favour? Oh, we speak to it, yes. Thank you. Correction.
Thank you, Mr Deputy. Obviously, we would have liked a little bit more money, but there's a lot more, hopefully, in the pipeline coming from the government. But one thing I would like to point out that there's no administrative overhead that's been taken out of the grant money that's been received. So I think that's really important that 100% of the money that's been received has been directed to the community. So I think that's really awesome. So happy to support it.
Any other speakers?
I concur with the comments of Councillor Roberts. Mr Mayor, I have nothing further to say.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Rotino.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Look, I'd like to thank the state government, but also thank our staff for putting a number of scenarios before the councillors for us to look at how we could equitably spread this money, but also look at the years. It's not just for this year, it's looking forward to 2021, 22, and the blend of waiving rates supporting rates in impacted areas, waiving fees and rate rebates. I think it's a great outcome and a responsible step to take, and thank the government and look forward to their next contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rotino. Any further speakers? For or against? Okay. All those in favour? That's unanimous again. Thank you. Now we go to... where are we? I had it here. The 2020 Australian Local Government Association National General Assembly Notice of Motions. Peter again. Cannizzaro.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. This report seeks Council's endorsements for 3 motions titled Telecommunications to provide additional communication infrastructure and appendices and devices in Appendix 1, telecommunication companies to ensure all infrastructure is fire resistant and regularly maintained, as Appendix 2, and expand increase funding of the Roads of Strategic Importance Initiative as it relates to Prentice Highway, as Appendix 3. Council will no doubt note several discussions we've had around the fire emergency of late and the telecommunication issues that many of our communities faced during that period. And we are looking to put these motions up to the 2020 National General Assembly of the Australian Local Government Association, which is held in Canberra in June 2020. So if it still goes ahead, yes. So I'm happy to take questions with respect to the proposed 3 notice of motions.
Okay, and there is, did you have a question? No, you want a second? Thank you, Councillor.
Mr Cannizzaro, in relation to the mobile towers, my understanding was there was a lot of talk about the redundancy aspect of the backup energy. Is that included in these motions?
Not specifically in those words, but certainly Appendix 1, the telecommunication companies provide additional communication infrastructure and devices, so infrastructure meaning all of the resilience and redundancy aspects as well.
Thank you. Okay. We're ready for a vote. Oh, you want to talk to it? Thank you, Councillor Pell.
Have you got a seconder yet?
I thought we did. Yeah, Councillor Reid.
Are you going to talk to us? Okay, in a minute.
Yeah, you go first, Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I'm just going to keep my words pretty straightforward. I think, councillors, if you can recall the words of Mrs Young when she addressed council just a short time ago, the strength and the need of this recommendation before the National Council, gathering of councillors, is most pertinent. The paucity of communications throughout our shire, and particularly in the far east and into the high country, is a perennial problem that has been with us for many, many years, and the recent bushfire events has once again brought it to highlight the drastic need we have for improved communications throughout our country. This is a national problem, and I commend the recommendation to be pursued at the Australian, the wider Australia-wide level. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
And you where do we go now? You wanted to
come over here, that's fine. Yeah. Thanks, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you for your patience.
These recommendations really ring true and resonate with our communities from the, as Councillor Ellis said, the high country, Bonang, Mallacoota, Cann River, even Marlow and Orbost, Sarsfield, Tambo Upper. Within 10 kilometres of Orbost, of Bairnsdale in the height of that crisis, we were cut off. We were isolated. And to think that in southeastern Australia, 10 million people, the two major cities in Australia were cut off by one of the two major roads for 6 or 8 weeks is extraordinary. That's third world stuff. This should have carriage through and resonate through many local government authorities, and I hope that the federal government can act on these recommendations promptly.
Yeah, I'd say fourth world stuff. Fourth world, yeah, because we were involved with that too up at Brenamba. We had our issues with that. Yes, okay.
If I may, Mr Deputy Mayor, I'd like to speak in support of the motions and say to the officers what a great job that they've done in putting these together, because in the aftermath of what we've actually been through in this region, they are very relevant motions and should be heard on a national level. But not only that, our voice now has never been at a stronger level, and the opportunity, if we don't follow through with it, as in the past we've voiced this before, but we have not received, and I want to strengthen that wording in regards to the telecommunications issue, particularly because we have felt it in the past that our communities have been cut off in the face of disaster. We had no idea what was happening to the eastern side of our region from Bensdale East. Basically, that's 300 kilometres worth of area that we had no communications with because the service was so terrible. And in the likes of that, it is a very real safety hazard for our region, and it's a life-threatening issue in the face of the heat and the bushfires that we actually went through. Not only that, the opportunity here is also to raise the issues of our Princes Highway being cut also from Bensdale to the border, which is 300 kilometres. If I could state that again, most regions or councils in our region don't even go 100 kilometres from east to west or north to south. But the bottom line for us is this is actually the second biggest council in the state, and we have one of the hardest road areas in the state, and we have the major Princes Highway, which is highway number 1, going straight through our region, which should be considered a lifeline, and it is a major transport route, it is a tourist route, it is our community's life and blood, and the bottom line is we should not be in the situation today where our highway can be cut off for 7 weeks, that our communities be isolated for 7 weeks without food and water and fodder for the animals. It is absolutely unacceptable. So to me, these 3 motions are extremely important to our region, and I know when we go to Canberra, I'll be yelling this at the top of my voice, and we'll get more than 3/4 of support from all the national councils in the nation. So with that stated, I'm really pleased for our officers to be putting this together for us to flag at the national level, because it needs to be heard very strongly. Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Pelch. Yes, a strong presentation. And Councillor Toohey.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I'd just like to concur with Councillor Peltz. We have spent yesterday and today in our local communities that are further from Bairnsdale, and aside from the telecommunications issues that are widely acknowledged as local issues, one thing that was driven home quite forcefully to me was the road as well, and I can't help but totally agree. 7 weeks without the main artery that is our area in this day and age is unacceptable. So yeah, can't help but agree with the recommendation and hope that something happens. Thank you.
Yeah, we hardly need a vote on this to know it's unanimous. All those in favour? Oh, did you have something more to say? No. All those in favour? Absolutely. Thank you. Now, let's move on to 6, urgent and other business. There's a late item here.
Deputy Mayor and councillors, I'd like to move that an urgent and other business item be relating to contract CON 2019-1376 Orbost landfill bushfire waste operation be admitted to the agenda and heard at item 6.1.
Happy to second, right. And what actually, you told us what it is? It's here.
So all we need to do now is we just need to vote on whether it's being accepted as a matter of urgent and other business. So
Okay.
put that to the vote.
Thank you. I put that to the vote. You may have heard, Mr CEO, as a matter of urgent and other business, be put to the vote. All those in favour? Right, unanimous again. Thank you. And we go on from there.
Mr Deputy Mayor, I'm happy to move that also dot point 7, moving the item in confidential business. I move that the term related to contract CON 2019-3076 Orbost landfill bushfire waste operations be considered in the agenda as item 7.2 under the confidential business and be under confidential business and be detailed in camera in accordance with its designation and a confidential report under section 89 (2) D of the Local Government Act 1989 as it relates to confidential matters.
And thank you, Councillor Peltz. Now, seconder, please. Councillor Rattino. Any further comments? No, thank you. Let's put this to the vote.
Just to clarify, we're moving this, beg your pardon, this item and the other remaining contract matters into camera in this one motion.
Through you, Mr Deputy Chair. Mr Deputy Mayor, sorry. No, this item, motion is simply to move this item into camera, so into confident, just the one item. We will then have to determine whether we go into in camera again. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Let's have the vote. All those in favour? Unanimous again. And we need to ask the...
Mr Deputy Mayor, I'm happy to move that Council now close the meeting to the public in accordance with the provision of section 89(2)D of the Local Government Act 1989 to consider items 7.1 and point 2 as these items relate to contractual matters.
Thank you. Second it, please. Thank you. And I think we've just tossed this around enough. Any?
Who seconded it? Who was the seconder?
Councillor Ralph. Thank you. Okay. We're all in favour, please. Yep, we are. Or those against if they like, but that doesn't happen. So I'll need to ask the public to leave the chambers and what we deal with this matter because it's in confidence and that's how the rules go. So thank you very much for your attendance, but you can also come to when we are in the meeting again. So thank you very much.